we throw slogans and we give titles to things without meaning and thinking about what it would look like, what would be the consequences of it, how would you implement it. I think it's imperative that people not look at such a complex issue with simplistic terms and rally around those terms rather than talking about the substance and saying, look, here are the real issues. You have a partner not willing to negotiate or recognize a Jewish state. You have other difficulties, problems that have to be overcome. The Prime Minister spoke of a two-state solution. Nikki Haley spoke again about a two-state solution. The President said they're for it, but would be open to out-of-the-box thinking on it. And probably that is the answer, is that we need out-of-the-box thinking and not just get caught in these trite terms and not deal with the complexities and the seriousness of the issues involved. I think it demeans the realities that these issues are dealing with when everybody says, tell us, are you for two-state, one state, half a state, three-quarters of a state? That's not the issue. The question is, we want to see a negotiated settlement. We want to see Israel live in peace with its neighbors. We want to see Israel secure for the long-term future, not short-term, and that any deal that Israel makes has to take that into account. And I think that it will open up opportunities, but at the same time, we recognize the difficulties that entails. And people can't say, you can't just say you want a peace today and impose it. It's not going to work. History teaches it doesn't work. And I think that most people have come to that recognition. I would say that we are not ambassadors. We are not messengers. We are advocates of an American Jewish community, which we represent, the 53 member organizations. It's not the entirety. We don't purport to speak for American Jews. Nobody speaks for a whole community, a country of, community of 6 million people. We do try to represent the consensus of the member organizations of the Conference of Presidents who represent the bulk, certainly of organized Jewry. Unaffiliated people, if you're not involved, you have no say. People who are involved have the say. So we try to represent those who are involved, who come from very different points of view, from the far left to the far right, representing all the streams. And our job is, we see ourselves as advocate, educators, facilitators. There are sometimes things that we can do that the State of Israel can't. We sometimes have contacts with countries that Israel doesn't. We're not a government. We don't have the power of a government. We don't legislate. We don't seek to supplant the government. We don't look to be intermediaries in that regard. We do want to help wherever we can, and because America is unique, because the American Jewish community's role in America is unique, that it gives us the opportunity for a minority group to have involvement, say, access that was not true in communities in the past. That the greatest power in the world gives this Jewish community a tremendous opportunities. And when we travel abroad, the governments, we talk to the White House, State Department before we go. They will make phone calls. They will facilitate because they see it as advantageous. Because we go, we are not flamethrowers. It's very easy to get headlines, and you guys will all love it if I will say terrible things about somebody or something. Somebody especially, right? But that is not our style. And I don't do many press conferences because I really believe that our success in doing things is that 90% of what we do is behind the scenes. It's quiet, that it gives us credibility with the people we are interlocking with, that they know we never leak and we don't disclose, and that therefore I won't quote any of the people that I mentioned, even Sisi or others, because I think that's for them to say what they have to say. It is for us to use the opportunities that, thank God, we have to help make a difference. And that's how I see our role.
This is an area that we watch very carefully. Obviously, ADL is one of our constituents. Look, there has been a rise. There have been a number of Jewish community centers over the last months who unfortunately have had to evacuate with threats. We live in a time, we had a very, very difficult presidential election. The election process itself was not a process that perhaps somebody who is a purist would like to have seen. And that atmosphere in and of itself, what happened and what was said, both during the primaries and actually during the general by certain groups, have created an atmosphere within which some of these creeps just raise their nasty heads again. And I think in many ways, when you have a dark, wet area, you might get mold. And that's what we're seeing in the United States now.
Anti-Semitism is on the rise everywhere. It's true on our campuses. It's true in our communities, as Stephen said. And I don't believe it should be tied to politics. We have to look at this. It's a sickness in every society. That a society has haters is not a judgment. It's how they deal with the haters. How do those in authority address anti-Semites, racist bigots? What is the determination with which they are willing to condemn and to enact legislation, and for police to take, or law enforcement to take the appropriate action? And I think one of the things is the application of the anti-Semitism definition and mandating that the Department of Education apply it across the country at universities so that they can be held to account for the violations that take place. Too many times administrations have sought to avoid responsibility, are not being held to account, and that is for faculty, and sometimes faculty are the violators, and that they have to be held to account. It means the supporters, the alumni, and the communities where they're located have to help the students. And our Lawfare project is providing legal assistance to students across the country who face problems on their campus where they simply engage in pro-Israel or other activities. We're not limiting people's right to speak. We are opposing their right to spread hate and incite to violence, and we have seen violence. We've seen, Jewish fraternity houses attacked across the country. I still think that a big portion of anti-Semitic attacks don't get reported. And while people write and talk a lot about the increase in Islamophobia, the fact is that Jews are far more likely to be a target of a hate attack than a Muslim. And while there has been an increase in recent months, the fact is that anti-Semitism still is the largest category of these kind of attacks. So while we see all sorts of conflicting tendencies, that support for Israel, over 70% of Americans, we see very broad support. We know that it's weaker on one side, stronger on another. I don't think that the American society is collapsing and that Jews are in danger. But I do think there is a pandemic of anti-Semitism around the world, and that the tolerance, it's like any disease. You've got to fight it. You've got to come up with inoculations. You've got to fight it in the way the whole system addresses these things. It can't be piecemeal. And there has to be a policy of zero tolerance. We are too often the ones responsible because we tolerate it. We excuse it, we find ways. No, every time, and you have to be clear, and you shouldn't use anti-Semitism in a loose way. It has to be a powerful condemnation. And when people use it loosely, we demean its significance. And therefore, we have to involve ourselves with the systems in every country and hold leadership to account when they fail to address it. We know that anti-Semitism left unchecked just metastasizes further and further.
Are you satisfied with the answers given by the American government lately?
Well, I think a lot of the charges are unfounded, but I do hope that the president will be clear. I don't think he understood the question that last press conference. It was clear that his answer indicated that he didn't hear or probably didn't hear the question as it was asked, because it was actually asked in a very respectful way and asserted that the reporter recognized that he was not an anti-Semite, he wasn't promoting it, et cetera, which obviously is. And if look at the number of Jews that are being appointed to this government and stuff. So I think that the president helps set the tone for a country, and that means every president. And needs to. We always want to see clear declarations, but more importantly, we want to see clear actions. And I'm hopeful that what he said about the really addressing hate and racism of all kinds in American society will be translated into clear action. But in the meantime, the moral voice of a president is very important, and sending a clear signal, because what we saw in the campaign was that the extremes of the left and right come together. They look very much alike. And the extremes that we saw on the left and the extremes on the right often manifested anti-Semitic attitudes, and we saw the unleashing of forces during the campaign, rhetoric, and rhetorical, and others, that could potentially be dangerous. So it's very important, and this can't become a Republican, Democrat, political, conservative, liberal issue. This is an issue, it's one of those fundamental things where you've got to stand up together and say we're going to fight it. We're not going to let anybody divide us on this. And it's true of bigotry and racism, it's got to be true of anti-Semitism. And that the Jewish community has a primary obligation, because it's directed at us, not to say, to say that we will not tolerate and we will not allow it to be tolerated. And to hold to account not only those who engage in it, but those who incite, those who are responsible, those who help support it.